if you are the full recipient of your royalties, you earn $2 to $7 to $10 a book, depending on where it gets sold and how it gets sold. Like, you can earn that back. You can make those reinvestments. You can make much more intelligent decisions about, and spend much more effort promoting your book or pushing your book, or just have the flexibility to use your book how you want it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pentz. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
Hey, on the pod today, we are privileged to be joined by Eric Jorgenson. This guy has done like everything. He self-published his own books that were huge, like the Almanach of Naval. And then through that, he's got some experience in the startup world, and he's a podcaster himself with smart friends, and which you should definitely go check out. And he's now the CEO of Scribe Media. So Eric, welcome to the pod. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you very much.
Cool. So tell us like how you got into self-publishing. Tell us a little bit about like your experience with the one guy who made money self-publishing.
It's a series of happy accidents, actually, is like how you could characterize my career. I sort of accidentally became the compiler of like Naval's book. I had been a fan of his for so long. Like, I followed him for 10 years. He was one of the very first people I sort of got introduced to in the startup world. As like, it's like, if you read all of Naval and you read all of Paul Graham, you'll understand what you need to about the startup world. And so I've been following him for years. I'd learned a ton from him. And at some point it struck me like all of this value that he was creating in podcasts and Twitter was just these very like small subcultures. They were ephemeral, and I'm a huge reader. I'm a big Buffett and Munger fan, and all of those books are like these compilations of their talks or their shareholder letters or whatever. And I was like, man, I wish somebody would like do a compilation of Naval. And I was like, well, maybe I should do it. And so I tweeted out this like half-assed joke thought idea and went to bed and woke up to find that Naval had retweeted it and 5,000 people said yes. And they're like, oh my God, you should do it. And Naval said, I'm happy to provide what you need. Like, go for it. And I was like, oh, I got work to do. Like, I thought this was going to be like a small little maybe project. And now it's like, I thought I'd spend a few months on it. And 3 years later, I had a manuscript ready. So it was a big journey to get that first draft done. And then I tweeted like, hey, I've got a manuscript done. And Tucker Max, who's, huge 4 times best-selling author, was like, hey, I can help you get that thing published. Like, let's get on the phone. And so started talking to Tucker, and Tucker gave me this like lay of the land of publishing, kind of showed me the different options and talked about the book and what we hope to achieve with it. And this was relatively early on in him starting Book in a Box, which became Scribe, and just being like, hey, like we can help you get this thing published really professionally. I was like, all right. So I became a customer of Scribe. I published Almanach of Naval with Scribe and absolutely had a great experience. Loved everybody I worked with there. And I mean, the experience of writing the book was great, but publishing it has changed my life and had an amazing sort of past. It's been out for a little more than 3 years now. Achieved orders of magnitude more than I ever thought it would.
Yeah. What are sales now? What are sales up to?
We sold over 1 million copies. And we give away the digital version for free. So we've given away, it's hard to track actually, but like 3 or 4 million more copies translated into, I think we're 40 languages in progress or something like that. So it is a really like, I mean, I thought I was doing fan service for Naval nerds, but it really struck a chord, and it just gets recommended and recommended. There's like a viral factor to this book. And so people just keeps growing through word of mouth. It's amazing.
That's incredible. And you published after that, right?
I did. Yeah. The Anthology of Biology
that's right.
Is the follow-up. So
I'm not as
similar.
big a fan of his, so I didn't read that one.
I think you'd be surprised. Like the thing that I tried to do with that book, people who you're probably aware of him from like hot takes on Twitter, basically, right?
The $1 million Bitcoin or whatever thing.
Yeah, that's like those are like his peak viral moments. And what I tried to do in that book is actually show like the foundation of the worldview that he has. This sort of like history is driven by new technology. Like the technological creation of order is the fundamental thing behind all of business. Here's a great line of like, we tend to think about the technology business or the technology industry. And he's like, that's insane. That's like saying there's a physics industry. Like every business uses technology and to a very large extent wins or loses on the quality of their technology because everything else tends to get competed away. But if you have a proprietary technology, or if you're using a technology that your competitors aren't, or if you're the first to adopt it and you gain that market share and you get that feedback loop of like a higher margin that comes from technology, like every business should be pushing towards the frontier of technology use in their industry and can find an edge in that. And I think that's like a very underexplored thing. Like what does the tech industry even mean? Like what is that? It just comes to kind of mean software or FANG stocks or whatever right now. But that's a pretty naive thing that we all just use without really even thinking about it.
Totally agree. And if you think about AI as an unlock for that, right? Like where you've got, we're not there yet. You still, you can get programming done, but you still need to know programming. You still need to load it in an environment where it'll work. It's not perfect, right? But it strikes me we're a year or two away from programming your own CRM by just like putting the words in, right? And what are my top 10 sales leads, and what are the 5 things I have to do to advance them to the next stage? I mean, you're just going to be able to spin that up. Think about all the apps people have wanted to do, but they didn't have the resources or skill level. Now everything's going to be big. That's going to be baked into everything.
Yeah. I think even if you're running like a small home service business or something, like just using Notion or Airtable or something and being able to query your customer base, just having it in a software tool that uses AI where you can ask it questions like that of like, who have I not heard from in the last 6 months? Like that's a really valuable question to answer, actually. That would take you hours of spreadsheeting in a normal tool. But if you are using the right software tool or something that's consistently being developed or has the right AI access, like there's a lot of cool stuff. And, the businesses that are in every industry that are first to adopt some of that stuff will find a real advantage in there.
My main company is government contracting. So in some ways we do tech work for the government in some cases, but the reality is like it's a very difficult technology environment. The government's not a quick adopter. So it's been interesting, like trying to get our people to use the technology. And you really have to and these are young people. I mean, I have people in their 20s, right? And it's like you're leading the horses to water and they don't want to drink, but like it's coming. And it's just like, I've realized this I've just seen the real-time gap in adoption in the last year since ChatGPT came out. I immediately adopted it. Now I've stopped using Google. I only use Perplexity AI. I use Pi. I use, Gemini and ChatGPT. I got them all running.
You're early.
My computer's dying. So, but getting the people in the company, even like relatively young people, college educated, it's been tough, but it just does feel like this wave that's coming anyway. And tech is going to be, I always think of that Andreessen letter, software is eating the world, but there are whole parts of the world that it didn't eat, right? One of which I work in: government, healthcare, education, housing. But it does feel like now AI is maybe the unlock for a lot of that getting eaten.
We are making some investments in AI enabled like vertical businesses that I think are really like, even in places that are really invisible to the normal consumer, right? Like AI enabled tool and die manufacturer. He's like, I think this business will become the biggest tool and die manufacturer in the world, and they're going to drastically reduce the time it takes and the investment, which is a huge unlock for all of the rest of manufacturing. But it's like nobody's ever going to know. They're just going to be like, one more thing in the supply chain, making everything a little cheaper, a little more abundant. Like I'd find that stuff so cool.
My other passion is I just help these guys buy a metal fab outside of Boston. So we're actually going to grow and we've been talking about how to bring tech into the business. And it's, I got to tell you, if you ever saw how this business was run before, I mean, they're like file cabinets on file cabinets, and every quote you got to go 3 different files. And like, we're moving to spreadsheets. So we're in the spreadsheets now, which is awesome, but we're going to get the AI in there eventually. So, anyways, that's close to my heart as well. All right. So we're going down that rabbit hole, but let's get back to self-publishing. So how did you end up, obviously, were you Scribe's biggest success Do you think?
Oh, no. David Goggins is probably the biggest name that Scribe has published. I mean, he sold 5 million books, which is, I think, the best-selling memoir of all time. It's like unbelievable, the success that he's had, and well-deserved. I mean, the guy's an animal, and he's out there, promoting his books and doing speaking gigs and going on podcasts, and he's really consistent on social and sharing his message. But most of the people who publish with us don't do it for optimizing book sales. I mean, David Goggins came to us because he's like, I know that I have a banger. I believe in this book. I'm going to give it my all. Like, I want the whole upside of my book. And we're like, okay, we are the place to do that, right? We don't take royalties from our authors. We're a professional services firm that just helps them publish the book that they want, and they keep make all their final creative decisions. They keep all their rights. They keep 100% of their royalties. So we facilitate. And so Goggins is out earning every other author out there because he keeps 100% of his royalties. He doesn't split them with anybody. And we just helped him put that book together and put it out there. And my book is probably up there with all credit to Naval. It is his genius that makes that book what it is. But I mean, we published 2,000 other books for 1,000 other authors. And for most of them, their goal is not sell as many books as humanly possible. Their goal is something like, help me establish a category, help me increase my speaking fees, or get more speaking gigs, or help me transition careers, or help me establish myself as an expert in this space, or drive more business to my service business or my consulting business. So for a lot of them, they come in and say, like, look, my audience is 1,000 readers. Like, no traditional publisher is going to care about that, but a book will transform my life and transform my business and become the thing that I am most known for, and can help me build my reputation and be this incredibly high trust piece of collateral that's out there representing me and my worldview and my expertise, helping sort of build trust and bring me customers. And that's a really, really useful thing.
So tell me how you got to Scribe from being an author to being the CEO.
Yeah. So this is a wild story. So I was just going along as a happy customer of Scribes. I was halfway through probably publishing my second book, been working with them for a while. I had just visited the offices and met, some of the people there in person for the first time, and was like, this is great. And I got an email from an author buddy of mine who forwarded me an article that said, Scribe is shutting down effective immediately. And I was like, what? No way. This is a big business. It's been growing. It's been around for 10 years. I know a bunch of people there. There's no way. I would have heard first. It would have been something else. And it was true that was not true. And what had happened is somebody was misreporting some boilerplate that went out along with this really big layoff. But everything that happened before this moment. So it turns out, Tucker and Zach started this company 10 years ago. They built it up, brought on a CEO along the way, and eventually sold the business to that CEO. And this guy brought on his own investors and sort of ran the company independently for a year or two, but didn't have a board, didn't have a CFO, didn't have the financial controls in place, made some really aggressive investment decisions, just went off the rails. There's an unforced error, in my opinion, of spending way, way, way more than necessary or more than the business could support. And it sort of hit bankruptcy like a brick wall. It was a tragic bankruptcy. Absolutely. A lot of authors were left with work unfinished, some of whom had paid ahead for it. A lot of the team was laid off without notice. It was really poorly managed, and caused a lot of devastation. And it is incredibly sad. And people were very reasonably upset with that. And there was a bank loan too. So of course the bank is the senior creditor. So they take over the whole business. They, as soon as they realized what was happening, which the layoff brought their attention to, they were like, oh, this is all ours now. All the assets are ours. The landlord just locked the door and said, I own everything in it. And the bank owned everything else. And as a customer who's just sort of learning that this is happening, but also as a guy who knows sort of how, some of these private markets work and have friends who work in, private and permanent equity and who buy businesses, I was like, man, this is such an important business. It has such a solid foundation. I'm a happy customer of this thing. I know it's important to this industry. I know that there is so much good that has come of it. I can't imagine that this just goes to zero forever, and it would be a tragedy if it did. So let me make some phone calls. So I called some folks, got some people in touch with the bank and with the lawyers who were managing this bankruptcy process. And it turned out Sieva and Xavier from Enduring Ventures were kind of the first ones there with an LOI, and flew to Austin and met the team and dug into the history of the business. And we're like, man, there's a really, like, there was a solid foundation here. And this is something that is like worth rebuilding. And it'll be a long slog, but there's greatness here. And there's a really, the most important thing is there's a really dedicated team that was like sitting in the middle of a forest fire, like still at their desk, just being like, I'm not leaving. Like, I'm taking care of these authors. I'm taking care of my team. These people need me.
And they weren't getting paid at that point, were they?
It was not clear who was going to pay them, if they were going to get paid. They were just working their asses off to like do their best to do right by the people that they could. And they were taking so much heat for it too, because of course it's a huge mess and there's nobody else to yell at. So you're yelling at the people that are there, basically volunteering to like try to get everybody through. So yeah, it was a really rough summer for everybody involved, and it was a lot of hard work and a lot of heartache. But eventually the Enduring Ventures guys, Sieva and Xavier, sort of purchased the assets from the bank and came to an agreement with them, and started a new business, hired over that team, paid them for that work that they had done, and put up all the capital risk to kind of carry it forward and start. I give a lot of credit to Sieva because he sort of interim CEO'd through this really gnarly, like uncertain period for about a few months, and they picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, we need somebody to like run this business on an ongoing basis, and we think it should be you. And I was like, man, there's no way I'm your first call. And they're like, actually you are. You brought us the business. So
you alerted them to the deal originally?
Yeah, they're pretty well followed on Twitter, X. They're kind of similar ethos to Permanent Equity, but it's a long-term holding company, not a fund. So they are the two partners of it. They have some investors, and I think they own, upwards of 20 some businesses now, across kind of a wide range of things. But like professional operators, professional business buyers, like long-term orientation, all the things that sort of, just as I thought about it as a steward of Scribe, of just like, I just want somebody like sane with a smart, long-term, stable outlook, who's not going to pillage this thing, who's not going to bastardize it. Like, I just want to keep using it as a customer who is a person who has the right outlook.
How long till when they hit the wall and so they did the layoff till when they got in control? How long did that take?
I don't know the exact dates. I think it was like it was more than 30 days, but less than 90.
Wow, that is fast. So there was a bankruptcy court and it was all spun up that quickly? Like,
I don't
think filed?
I don't think the full bankruptcy process was done by then.
I guess
it was the bank.
So,
yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So that's great that they were able to do it so fast, because the whole thing would have been gone if it had taken longer than that. Right.
Yeah. That was part of the panic, because like the value is eroding for every day that uncertainty remains,
Sure.
So, and again, I was like, I connected them, but I was not a part of that process. So I'm not a reliable authority on the details of that. It's not my wheelhouse.
So like a couple months into it, Seva's like, this sucks. Let's go get the guy that got us into this mess, right? And make him fix it, right?
I think Sieva did all the heavy lifting in the really dark days there. But it'll be a while, due to just the nature of the business. I think it'll be
and that was
a while
how long
to rebuild.
That
was August 23.
Yeah, so this is new. And
so I'm 6 months in now. Yeah.
Yeah. So how's it been going? Like, can you talk a little bit about if you can give any figures at all, whatever you can give, like how far it went down, how you've helped it recover? I think you guys have been doing a great job since you took over. So.
Yeah. And I think it is certainly in the high end of expected outcomes. If you would have asked us to write down like a bull bear base case in July, I think we were prepared for much worse than we're dealing with now. The nature of the business is, it's, let's say, like a 6-month sales cycle to bring a new author on who wants to write a book. A lot of people are either thinking about it or still finishing a manuscript or just want to find the right timing. So there's a natural sort of organic growth to that. And then even once we sign a new author, that's, it's a 12 to 15 month contract. And so it takes a while to kind of build this thing back up and get it back to running full force. We did have 100 and close to 200 sort of authors who were clients of prior Scribe sort of re-sign with us and carry forward. So we had a bunch of work in progress, and we published 65 books, I think, in the last 6 months. So we got another 150 plus in progress. So,
and what do you think that was compared to like their peak? Was it, or how far off?
I don't know. Their peak was probably double that, maybe a little more is my guess.
So they took like a 50, they were probably below 50% at some point, and then you got it back up.
Yeah, and it's hard to know. Like there's some spiky behavior in there that you're like, I'm not sure how sustainable, some of those high points were. But I think we're rebuilding a really solid foundation, I think, and back to just the team and the culture that you end up with when the team is made of people who just like held on through a forest fire is really like everyone is so dedicated, so hardworking, so in it for the right reasons. It's a really like, it feels like lean and mean and great. And the trust amongst the team is really, really high. So we're just working hard to sort of preserve that.
That's fantastic. I mean, coming into that situation is tough. I mean, and it sounds like Sieva did some work on the front end, right, to help you. It must have been tough coming in. I mean, I guess being a customer and you knew the people, a lot of the people that helped, but taking a transition from that kind of disaster to some stability, then to transition, that's tough.
I mean, everybody's looking for a little certainty when there's not always certainty to offer. And you got to really find that balance, I think, of transparency and reassurance. I was lucky to have some credibility with the team coming in, having been author with them already, and being an outspoken sort of fan of the company certainly helped. Yeah, I mean, most of the people I know, like my friends who are CEOs, like built their company around them. So onboarding as a CEO, especially into an environment like that, it was like kind of a wild,
I can imagine.
A wild experience.
Well, and had you run a company before?
No.
Wow. Okay. So that's pretty wild, man. You go from, and how many people were there, do you think, when you got on board?
24.
Wow. All right. So it's a decent small company there.
Yeah. I mean, I had run a company, but it was like just me and like NEA. And I had done sort of my time in the startup world. I considered like a CEO apprenticeship, and I grew up in a small business household, and I've been like reading business books obsessively for my whole life. So like, this is not to say I like was born yesterday and like figured it out, but like I've been, it was a very interesting test of the intuition that I've been trying to build, I suppose. And I mean, whatever, we're still very early, right? Like success in this endeavor is measured in decades, not months.
And are the guys offering some mentorship as well? I'd assume, right? They're skilled operators,
and that's part of what made me feel good about sort of taking this role, is being like, all right, I've got a board of Sieva and Xavier who are experienced operators to sort of guide me. I'm lucky to have friends and mentors who are experienced CEOs who I can pick up the phone. They've got a CFO who's a shared resource across the portfolio of businesses who's amazing. And people within the company who have been there for years and know what they're doing. So there's some advantages to this. Is like, I'm not prone to micromanagement because I don't know the industry and I don't know the business. And a lot of times, like, I lean on the institutional knowledge that is there and trust the people and try not to hide my ignorance of the industry and the business and the track record, and just be like, all right, you guys.
I always say take a job after something really terrible has happened. Like, maybe not quite this, but like, you're only going to do better than the other guy who like ran into a brick wall. So it is
counterintuitively like there's a lot of silver linings to that forest fire, and there's regrowth that comes after it. I've been through a few sort of expansions and contractions startup world as well, and there's it's really heartbreaking to see a bunch of people leave a company or to go through a recapitalization or a bankruptcy or a big layoff. But there's also like waking up again in that new dawn and being like, okay, like we have a renewed sense of clarity. There's green shoots that come up from the soil.
How many employees are there now?
It's still in the mid-20s.
Mid-20s. And are you guys like getting to cash flow positive kind of territory? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we're getting to cash flow positive. We're trying to invest in growth. So that's like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of for the moment here. And it'll, just due to the nature of the business, it'll take a while to see accounting profit, but we're all, kind of patient and ready for that.
So let's get into the business a little bit. So you guys do so the model is that you charge a fee for service, right? And kind of just go through what the service is, how it works, that kind of thing.
It's a professional service business, which is really like pretty simple business model wise. What makes it unique is that in the publishing industry, the traditional model is kind of the opposite. And from my perspective, this is like our model is the future, and I take no credit for creating it. I just sort of recognize the genius in what Tucker and Zach had done, because as an author coming into this and having self-published my first book, I think it's insane that the default model is the traditional publishing model, which is a 150-year-old business model, right? So if you look at like the environment that model grew up in, everything has changed. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you needed a huge capital upfront investment to do big print runs of a book. You needed the physical distribution system to get them into the bookstores. You needed the access to the bookstores to get it on the shelves. And you needed connections to newspapers or TV or whatever to get the word out about the book, because that was the only, getting a review in the newspaper was the only way to get the word out. So it's a very centralized, upfront, capital intensive thing. And now if you look at the sort of operating environment of the publishing industry, 90% of books are sold on Amazon. There's no gatekeeper there. A huge percentage of the books that are sold are print on demand. So you don't need a huge upfront capital investment. There's no gatekeeper, no capital risk there. And third, there's no, to a much greater extent these days, people just recommend books to each other on social media, email newsletters, podcasts. Like nobody's like reading the book review and being like, oh my God, like that's the Kingmaker book of the year. Like if they do, it's, Reese Witherspoon and Oprah and their book clubs. Like there are still celebrities, but like they are not controlled by the traditional publishers nearly as much as the kind of media pipeline was. And so to me, like if you're a creator, you already have an audience, and you're going to sell 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies. Like that's a great outcome. Why are you giving up 80, 90% of your royalties, which is what these traditional publishers take in a lot of cases, plus the agent's fees on top of that? What are you getting for that, the value that you're giving up? And I really encourage people to think about their book as an asset. Like what is the lifetime of those royalties? Think about it like a business, and then value the equity of that thing. And then you're selling the majority control to a partner that has this big portfolio that could just be holding you back and giving you, taking dollars, and where you get pennies for the whole lifetime of this book. Like that's crazy to me.
So the old model is sort of like almost a VC model, right? Where they were funding you, and then every component of it beyond just the writing of the actual book, actually just like marginal costs went to, or like upfront costs went to close to zero. So then what are they really funding at that point, right? So
ask them, if you're considering a traditional publishing deal, ask them, what does it cost to publish a book? Because if you bring us a manuscript, we can get you a published book in all formats, well, in all the physical formats and ebook for $18,000. And, audiobook is a little add-on top of that. Like you're selling majority control for the lifetime of your book for them floating that amount of money. Like it's just crazy to me. And granted, like most books don't make their money back. If you are the full recipient of your royalties, you earn, $2 to $7 to $10 a book, depending on where it gets sold and how it gets sold. Like you can earn that back. You can make those reinvestments. You can make much more intelligent decisions about and spend much more effort promoting your book or pushing your book, or just have the flexibility to use your book how you want it. Most of the people, as I mentioned, who write books with us, they're like, I have 1,000 key readers that I really want to read this book. Those are my clients. That's who I want to recognize my expertise. I don't care if I sell 10,000 copies. I'll give away 1,000 copies because it'll bring me $5 million in service revenue. It's like, okay, great.
Yeah, the monetization is somewhere else. It's not in the book, right?
And if it costs $20,000 to $50,000 to have that asset that helps you bring in millions of dollars of sales, like that's a no-brainer. And what you really need is the freedom to use that book however you want. I want to shove that thing in an envelope and I want to mail it to every Fortune 500 CMO, or I want to mail it to every lawyer in Kansas City, or whatever the thing is for you. That flexibility to use the book in service of the ultimate goal that you want to create in your life, like that's what really matters. And that's where the huge value is going to be. It's not going to be in the book royalties.
So now you guys go so the services go, so you just mentioned 20 to 50. So take us through like what kind of services determine where you go in that range.
There's like three main paths. One is you already wrote the book and you want our help to publish it. The second is you want your fingers on the keys. You want to be the writer. You want to write it yourself, but you want the guidance, you want accountability, you want a private coach, you want to edit as you go, and you want to know at the end of this time, this 500 or 1,000 hours you spend at the keyboard, that this book is not going to suck and will get published and will be done at a high level. That we've got, we call Guided Authors, the program for that. And then we've got Scribe Professional, which is for people with the least time. And that the sort of medium there is we interview people with expertise and we pair them with a scribe or a ghostwriter to sort of pull that information out of them, help them position the book, help them structure it, help them put their expertise in a logical order and bridge that gap between, usually a domain expert and the audience has a huge gulf between them, and you need somebody to help you translate that. And so that's about 50,000. And it only takes it takes 12 months, but it only takes 50 hours, give or take, over the course of that year. So in basically 1 week's worth of time, we can get you a book of your ideas in your voice, and we iteratively check that we're capturing the voice, check that we're capturing the ideas, check the book cover design and the page layout. And we can take care of, really, it was we're your private publishing company, really. And then for the very high end, we've got sort of a set of custom services that go from 130,000 all the way up to you could probably spend $500,000 without wasting money if you have that kind of budget and you're really trying to, sometimes that's for people who are want to really enshrine their legacy and they have a lot of money to spend. They really want to become a household name. They really want to transform a category or really shift a much broader set of things. So,
and what are you doing there? Is that the PR marketing end of it that you do after, or some kind of thing?
Yeah, that's the budget for you want a writer who has written an absolute best-selling book before. So those writers with that level of track record are much more expensive, and then you can do a lot on the back end of book marketing and publication and promotion. And if that comes back to you in a much broader, in a much bigger way in the business lines, or just in feeling good about what you're doing, we're working with somebody who has built a brand that is a household name, very, very big business, but that person's name would not be known. And so this is kind of the okay, this is my, you can imagine what Phil Knight did and what Ray Dalio did of okay, this is my, I'm in my 60s or my 70s, I'm shifting into my teaching mode of life, my kind of third chapter. And I want to do it with gusto. And so we were helping a few people kind of along those lines.
How does it, what is the marketing plan for a book? Or if you really want to do something with it, is it all give us an idea of what's happening in the industry where that,
without giving away different
secret sauce.
The secret sauce is usually execution. All of marketing, there's a lot of ideas. Life, right. No marketing department is short on ideas. Right. So I think there's a few different sort of broad directions. This is almost always a very custom kind of thing when you get into the larger marketing investments, because everyone's starting with a different thing. Some people already have a really big email list. Some people have a recognizable brand. Some people are starting from nothing, but they have an incredible story, an incredible book. So the kind of broad swath, just to set the landscape, is there's the whole sort of literary industry and book route of promotion, where it's all right, let's do some giveaways. Let's try to get you onto some bookstore shelves. Let's try to get the reviews. Let's try to pursue bestseller lists. Some of those are dubious ROI for book royalties, but it does raise the profile of everything. And it all depends what that ultimate goal is. What are you trying to create in your life? A book is a means to that more often than not. And then broaden out from there. You can pursue, yes, there's the whole PR, which is a pretty standard playbook. It's a little bit different for books, and there's some clever things that we can do there. And there's, a whole broad set of guaranteed placements. And then there's gambles. And PR is a big world on its own. And then there's usually an industry specific thing, depending on who the author is, who they're trying to reach. And sometimes it's, you do away with PR and you do away with the sort of book industry pieces, because what really matters to the author is penetrating their own industry or reaching one very specific audience. And the goal is all around that. And, the book never becomes a well-known book, but it does create that critical mass of awareness for the author in their industry. So there's a lot of, if you go to Scribe Media and you scroll through a bunch of our books, some of you will recognize, but most you won't. But if you find a person in that industry or talk to the author about what the book did for them, it could still be a huge impact.
I guess like when it's really industry specific, it's kind of they're mostly going to take the ball with that. But you should have a plan with like, hey, I'm going to publish this thing, and then I'm going to use it to get speaking spots at XYZ conferences or whatever it is for your world, right?
And we love even if it's an inter-industry thing, we love like brainstorming and helping to facilitate authors where we can. Right. And we try to start that conversation as early as we can. That goes all the way back to positioning. Is like, so a lot of people come in with like, I have 3 book ideas. I'm not sure which one to do first, or here's all the things that I know, but I'm not sure how they divide up into books. And we'll go through it. It's like, all right, what are your business goals? What are your life goals? Where's your head at right now? What's the logical sequence of these things? And so hopefully that marketing conversation starts really early, even in designing the positioning of the book and who that target reader is in the first place.
So talk a little bit about, so today, you can have audiences on social and newsletters and YouTube channels and all that kind of stuff. And you can do it lots of ways to monetize and use those audiences for whatever. What does a book do for you that doesn't?
To me, books are a little sacred. And I think there is a very real difference between books and other artifacts that is either difficult to describe or difficult to believe until you have felt it. There's just something like very rarely, you're a podcast host, I'm a podcast host. Like very rarely are we like, oh my God, we got to go like interview this new person who just like did an online course or who started or like this person has a big following on LinkedIn. I can't wait to get into the intellectual discourse of this person who's been like, shit posting on LinkedIn. It just lands differently than like somebody who does the work to put their ideas in a book and put the format of a book out there. It impacts like the intellectual discourse. It is a bat signal to get invited onto podcasts or onto stages or to have a discussion or to change an industry. Like it is just, it is a very interesting form of like intellectual arbitrage that people sometimes say shouldn't exist. And maybe you would have thought that it would have gone away 20 years ago, but it hasn't.
It's like a commitment signaling mechanism. It's sort of like what, they say part of college is just like, hey, you could graduate. So that's a commitment mechanism, right? That I can get with, if I interview you, I don't know. But if you're just shit posting on X, you might be interesting, but I have no idea if you thought through this. Do you have a real idea? Like, obviously, if you have a book, you've had to have done that.
It's much easier to sort of get past through with like uncritical thinking in a blog or social or podcast. I think in a book is just, it's a commitment signaling mechanism. It is a coherent, cohesive, like single piece of work that takes an investment. It takes a long time commitment. It's a discrete thing. And there's a lot of, to your point exactly, like people think about it and talk about it in a very different way because of how much investment has to go into it. And there's people who have written, like I've written many books worth of blog posts, and none of them has even come close to changing my life as much as writing a book did. And it took Morgan Housel wrote for 15 years before he wrote his first book. And we published our first books at the same time.
So the Motley Fool right down across the river here.
Yeah. And he's like, oh my God, I'm never not publishing a book again. Like this is just so much different and better. And we see a lot of those kind of like people who build a following online, who have written a lot online, and then they have an inflection point when they write a book. James Clear blogged for years. Morgan Housel blogged for years.
What do you think your best platform is from which to write a book? Is it like, I've got a blog, I've got a newsletter? Well, now it'd be a newsletter. Like I got a newsletter with lots of subscribers. I got lots of subscribers on XYZ platform. Does it matter? Like what is it you'd want to have to maximize your impact?
The real answer is like unique expertise or an amazing story or just the wherewithal to create the book in the first place. I think different people come in with very different advantages. Like David Goggins did not have a huge following before that book got published. Naval had like a pretty big follow. I mean, I think he had 750,000 followers when we published this book, and now he's got over 2 million.
By the way, I forgot to ask this. Was Naval involved in the economics of the book at all? Or is it?
No. And he wanted to be very clear that he is not earning any money from it.
That is, so to me, it's fascinating how, like, you doing that probably elevated his brand Like he probably got more value out of that than you did, even, in a way. It's a very interesting, that to me, and I know you might want to comment on that, but it's a very interesting thing to me how he's just kind of like, yeah, go. I'll help you do it, but I don't want to be a part of it or make money off of it. But it really helped him.
I kept him abreast of progress. But he says in the book that, if anybody's trying to sell you get rich quick advice, you should ignore it. And so I think, a big part of it is just like, I just want to hold true to his principles, and he's like, I want it to be very clear that I'm not selling this book. I'm not profiting from it. Like, I'm just allowing someone to share the things that I have shared.
So going back to the business. So you said it's about a 12-month process, 20 to 50 normally. So but can go up higher for a few people. So you guys are working with quite a few clients at one time, right?
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, I think we've got 150 books in progress right now. And it is like, I am not logistically gifted. Like, that's not where my stats max out. So for me to come in and see the inside of this business and see the people that are running this and like the Gantt charts and the the excellence of the project management of this team is so unbelievable. It is a hundreds of individual step process across 5 or more disciplines for every author, incorporating like more than a dozen individual people and checks and rechecks. And, to be able to go to every author and just look them in the eye and be like, Scribe does not miss deadlines. We run a very well-oiled machine. You can absolutely count on us to make our deliverables at the time that we said we would. It is a really amazing thing. It's a very big industry, and there's a long tail of relatively small businesses out there or individuals who do provide one or two of these kind of services in this, but there's almost nobody doing it at the scale and professionalism that Scribe is, which is why I see this as such fertile soil to grow a really amazing business. Like, I think this model is the future of publishing. Like, I have experienced that as an author. I'm a huge believer in it and the flexibility and the amount that it empowers authors. I'm so all in on this. And I think one of these businesses with this model will grow and rise and go toe to toe with traditional publishers over the next 10 years. And I think Scribe is the front runner.
How do you see the business changing to do that? Like, where do you think it's just going to be what it is now and you just do more of it and then that's where you'll be? Or do you think it's going to require something different?
I think it can scale up a lot with its existing model. And I think I see most of the growth in services coming from additional marketing services. I mean, a big piece of a thing I hear over and over again from authors coming in is like, I don't want this book to suck and I don't want it to flop. What can we do to get this book out there? Or making sure that they know that, for every person who reads this book, they are more likely to become my customer. So I just want to get it into the hands of the right people. And I think there's functionally infinite demand for demand generation. Like, if we can help people get their message out there, if we can help them meet the right people and attract the right people and build trust with their audience, and you're investing $10 and seeing 100 or 500 come back, like, you're going to keep making that trade every chance you get. I think this is actually a very savvy way to achieve that, and that there's a lot of ways we can continue to facilitate that and just keep helping our authors accomplish more.
The other thing I had thought about when doing a book, so I actually did a book with Scribe a while ago, but would you guys ever get into hey, this book is a part of a process of me trying to make an impact on this issue or build like a brand? So I want to build a newsletter and social following and have a community around, and the book is one part of that. Do you ever see yourself kind of doing the whole gambit, or is that something you should partner for? Or how do you see that?
I think there are definitely interesting edges to that. Yes. And I think it'll be a process of figuring out where we want to partner, where we want to build, maybe rarely where we'd want to buy, but I just like solving authors' problems and helping them achieve their goals.
What about doing a podcast as the person's writing the book about the book?
It is a relatively common ask for people. And especially since we're doing the interviews already, right? Like some people have teams or social contractors already who are like, hey, can I just get those recordings and like use them? They're like, yeah, sure, rock on. So some people are sort of starting to do that now, which is a great indicator that there's demand for that in the future. So yeah, it's definitely something to explore.
Yeah, I really see that as like the book is like a anchor point in a landscape of things that you're trying to do. Right.
The headwaters of so much great content. I mean, that's partly, why I encourage people to do a book in a context where they have the maximum freedom over it. Like if you want to give your digital copies away for free, like I did, because it helps you reach more people, or if you want to tweet your book out like one sentence at a time, like you don't have to answer to anybody. You can absolutely do that. Or you can charge $5,000 a copy and, make the jacket foil silver, gold. I don't care. Like just retain your flexibility to accomplish what you need to.
Yeah, because I see this as I was looking at some of the stats here. So there are 1.4 million self-published books through Kindle Direct every year. There were 2021, there were 2.3 million new books self-published. It's a $300 million books are sold self-published, and it's a $1.25 billion a year industry. Now, that's all from Perplexity AI, whether they have sites and stuff. But you think about the math on that, right? The vast majority of those books are probably not even read by anyone. And there are probably a few power law books that are most of the 300 million that are sold. So investing in it as part of, you talked about sort of more traditional way where you're kind of using it to get more speaking events and other stuff. But it strikes me that this sort of where I could see the industry going is really into this like full, suite of I'm helping you create a community, define a category, turn yourself into a brand. And this is one of 5 key things that you need to do.
I would try to sort of recontextualize that data in a few ways. One, I think, as I pointed out, like there is no gatekeeping to self-publishing anymore. So anybody can just publish a book that says 3 words, or that's generated by AI, or that's, written by, there's just really no gatekeep. So the denominator there is like totally ungoverned. So it is much sort of more absurd than it looks. Like average is a very sort of naive way to look at that, I think. There's also the most important thing, and I say this over and over and over and over again to authors, like a book does not have to make money to make you money. Ignore the book's economics. It is not going to matter. So all that to say, like self-publishing as an industry, is a very interesting thing. There are people doing interesting new models where people are just like selling ebook only. They publish a new book every month. It's almost like a newsletter. They're just, some of these like super high volume, like romance or fantasy things where it's like they write a series in 1 year. They publish a book every month. They barely edit it. And like their fans don't care because it's just they're ripping through it. So there's all kinds of interesting sort of emergent models. Yeah, it is really a frontier of interesting stuff going on.
And how do you see AI impacting the industry? I mean, one thing I've been thinking about recently is like, it's probably not going to be great for writing the book, maybe editing and suggesting, but what it can do is take an individual creator and almost turn them into a full brand, because you can repurpose content so much more easily. But how do you see it? Like, where do you seeing the emerging stuff now and then in the near future?
I mean, I think the learning curve will be steep for people picking up new things. I think it'll make some authors like hyper productive, and it should increase the polish of a lot of these indie folks. It should give leverage to almost everybody throughout the process as the tools get shaped around there. I think it'll, like what it could do in the future to transform things between mediums is actually quite interesting. But as we mentioned, like this is a power law dominated industry. Like the highest quality thing is always going to have drastically outsized sort of results, which is why we focus so much on quality and professionalism throughout every domain, through cover design, through interior layout, through like all of the accoutrement around publishing a book. Like I think readers can sniff out amateur stuff or subpar production, and like those, saving pennies impact the trust and the credibility of this artifact in the long run. But to the extent that AI can help people make their best even better, I think that's where you'll see the really, if AI can help you move from a top 5% book to a top 1% or top 0.5% book, the outcomes of that could be orders of magnitude different.
And then to repurpose it into newsletters, videos, tweets, it's like it just expands your ability when you have the core content. And then take us through a little bit, like how do you guys get customers? Is it mostly referral? Are you doing a lot of online marketing? Like how does it usually come in?
SEO and referrals are our biggest two channels. I mean, we're lucky to have, a 10-year track record and 1,000 authors who generally have great experiences with us. I myself have referred many people, and we have some like super referrers who have referred like dozens of people. So, the first thing you do if you decide you want to write a book is call your friend who wrote a book and be like, hey, what do I do? So we get a lot of new authors that way. And then, people just searching around for, how do I write a book? How do I write a business book? Help writing a business book, all that kind of stuff.
Are there a lot of people that write multiple books, or is it usually one of them? Yeah. How often do they write books? I'm curious.
People have different approaches, but like usually every 2 or 3 years. Like it's definitely possible to do more if you have a formula. So I'm talking to some podcasters now actually about doing like a yearly like compendium of lessons learned from each year, like a handbook to each year, which is a pretty interesting sort of thing. But you've got to do it every year. You got to start them almost overlapping. And, each book, as soon as you publish it, there's also then the work that goes into marketing it afterwards. You don't want to like right away abdicate it and go start the next thing. So funny enough, Morgan and I have both published like right about the same cycle, like every 3 years, like sort of together.
Now, does he have a contract now, or is he doing himself?
Yeah, he's got a big traditional, like multi-book traditional contract.
It's very interesting. Like I guess I could see why he did that in the past, but I could not imagine him re-signing that deal again now that he's big. It just seemed like, why would you give up all that money? He creates his own demand, right?
I mean, the economics of every author's sort of negotiations with a traditional publisher are different. Like, and most of the money that they make is from these like long-term back catalog, like 10 plus year old perennial sellers. And so their decisions about like what to invest competitively to stay relevant, like those are all very interesting. Like it would not surprise me if highly irrational things happened for some authors' benefits or not. And to some people, like they need the advance to write the book. Morgan's not this, but like some people need the advance to write the book. And for them, like going with the traditional publisher is a very rational decision. I don't begrudge that a bit.
Yeah, but when he first did it, he might have needed that, right? He was like a journalist at that point. So you see somebody going like every couple of years is sort of like the max you want to be doing it, but just because you don't want to kill your own marketing. And
yeah, everybody's different. Like I can imagine somebody with a good strategy for doing it every year and just like clockwork going. I also think, it's pretty common to see every 2 or 3 years people come out with new books, but it's addictive, man. Once you like go through that process and you feel what it's like to go start to finish on a creative project like that and see it out in the world and start to get feedback from people who've like read your book and loved it and had it change. They're like, oh my God, I implemented these changes and I loved it and it changed my life. And I gifted this book to my little brother, my whole family, or I gave it to my company. And like, it's just really energizing. And it makes you want to pick it up and do it again.
Have you seen Tyler? I don't know if you know Tyler Cowen. He's an economist. Yeah. Have you seen his book, The Greatest of All Time Economists, that he did this AI book?
Yeah. Him and Reid Hoffman both did almost fully AI generated books right around the same times.
Yeah. And they're kind of using it as like, they're almost like choose your own adventure books where you can like query it. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, it seems like that's just like sort of novelty right now, but could a book eventually become like almost like a mini large language model where it's like, it's a series of ideas that you encapsulate in this one place, and then it becomes a thing you can read or query or whatever.
GPTs are becoming that already. I mean, you could load a book into a GPT and sort of have a conversation with it, or load like, you could load the whole corpus of Naval's knowledge. The book just happens to be the most like discrete collected version of it. I have a friend, Max Olson, who compiled the letters of Warren Buffett, and like he built a Buffett bot. So, but it's like this full, huge corpus of information, even far beyond a book, where you can converse with it. So yeah, I think there's all kinds of interesting experiments that are going on here, and I'm excited about all of them as a like tech nerd. I'm also a believer that books are sacred and lindy and like 2,000 years old and very unlikely to be displaced by any of these is I'm excited about them. I want to play with all of them. I think cool things will come out of them, but I'm also like, man, books just like are not going. There's something incredible about the technology of a book, how pervasive it is, how universal it is, the worldwide logistical and network and process. It just, Naval had been prolific in podcasts and Twitter and had been widely followed. And this book took him into dozens more languages and all kinds of countries. I mean, he sold so many in India and China, and like the machine of that pathways that a book travels and the patterns that humans have to buy and share and gift books to each other is like really not to be underestimated.
I liked your distinction there because it is true. Like a GPT, yes, it's Warren Buffett's words or ideas that you're interacting with in a way, sort of, but it's your interaction and it's you kind of determining where it goes. Whereas there's something about a book where it's like you're following somebody else's brain pattern and their thought, and that's like a separate and distinct thing when done well is fantastic, right? And that's just a different thing than asking questions of a GPT or something like that.
Yeah, and I think if you did like, talk to somebody who's a hardcore sort of knowledge, somebody who's gone through like the Great Books program or teaches that they would very much be like, no, the book is the technology. Like you must wrestle with those ideas as they're presented by the author in this order. And you can use whatever you want outside of that book to sort of bolster your own understanding and dissect it and whatever. But like, let's not throw away like that is the baby in the bathwater. Like that book is the sacred artifact that has made it through hundreds of years and has been a part of the great conversation. So like, that's the canon. Let's leave it like it is.
I love it. That's the way we can wrap up today. But I actually, we'll wrap up. We'll leave it with that. I thought that was perfectly said. That is the future of the book. So, but Eric, I want to thank you a lot for coming on today. It was awesome. So it's really interesting learning about a business that like most business owners don't know anything about this kind of thing. There's only a few of you around. So it's really cool. And it sounds like there's a lot of cool shit to be thinking about and new services and stuff.
I'm having so much fun. Just like going down the rabbit hole of a new industry to me, really, that I've been like a light participant in. But I'm trying to read up on the whole history of the industry and get smart about it. It is a fascinating thing. As like a business voyeur, like it's fun to trade in these stories and to learn some of my own and be able to share them. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. All right, we'll talk to you soon, Eric.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pentz. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apentz on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.